Hi, I'm attorney Renee Osipov with Chelle Law, and we assist parents, guardians, and students who are having issues around special education, specifically IEPs or 504 plans in the public school or charter school setting. In this video, I'm kind of walking through examples of IEP goals and what are those, what makes a good goal, and I'll just kind of walk you through that process. So as you know, and you can check out my other videos as well, an IEP is codified in federal law, specifically the Individuals with Disability Act, which states that if a child qualifies, which are in my other videos as well, for special education services or accommodations, an IEP team will commence, the student will be evaluated, and then the IEP will be drafted. And in that IEP, there will be a specific section of goals. So that means where do we want that student to be after all of these services are provided. So the goal writing is really important because that's where you're going, right? So if it's vague, it's hard to know, are you going to reach that goal or not? Is the goal not realistic, right? So if the student is never going to be able to do something maybe physically, the goal should not state that because that's just not physically possible. But it should be something that is challenging for the student, and there are lots of accommodations and services to help them get to that level. But you just want a clear picture of where you're going and is it realistic? And your team can help you with that at the school level. Also healthcare providers, including therapists, psychologists, all of these people will assemble for the IEP meeting, and it will give a clear picture of where the student currently is, and then where they are going and how they're going to get there even. There are progress monitoring along the way, so that's tracking the student to see if they are reaching their goals. But first, the goal, let's walk through what the goal needs to be. So it needs to be specific. For sure. So like I said, broad and general goals are going to be very difficult to progress monitor and then to know where the student is, like have they reached the goal or not. It needs to be precise and it needs to target specifically what the student's needs are. The next, it needs to be measurable. So when I was talking about progress monitoring, sometimes it's called progress tracking, but these things are measurements. They're taking data that's tangible that you can look at to see if that student is reaching that goal. So it has to be measurable. So if you say something in a goal that the child will work more independently without prompts from the teacher. How is that measured? There's no sort of number system. There's no way to tangibly understand if this is met or not. So that would be really hard to be measured. Another one, it needs to be action oriented. So what this means is that the child should be tailored to really meet their needs. And who is providing these sort of aspects of the goal? So it definitely needs to be action oriented. And then again, I kind of had mentioned this before, they need to be realistic and relevant. So realistic was kind of what I was talking about before. Maybe this child's ability, they will never be at a specific level, and healthcare providers are explaining this to you. There is a diagnosis. It's just not going to happen. And that's okay because everybody is different, right? And that's the whole point of the IEP. But the goal needs to be realistic because it is heartbreaking for students, for parents and guardians to think that a goal is realistic when it's really not, and you're not hitting those, time and time again, year after year, you're not even close. The student is nowhere near these goals. That's heartbreaking, right? For everyone. So it needs to be realistic. Is this something that the student can do? And again, like I said, your IEP team should have a clear picture, lots of data, and using their knowledge to know what is realistic. And then relevant. So academically, these goals would for sure be relevant. Behavior inside the classroom is relevant, but you want to be careful of things that just like really aren't. So I'm trying to think of an example, maybe transitions or bathrooms, things like that. If that's not within the services needed for your child, there's no issues there, then it doesn't need to be written into the IEP because it's just not relevant. And again, when it's not relevant to the student, then it's also harder to track and monitor. So it's difficult. So again, it needs to be realistic and it needs to be relevant. And then lastly, there needs to be a time limitation on it. So what this means is normally IEPs are for 3 years, but they're tracked every year. They'll have to convey an IEP meeting. So sometimes goals are at a yearly level. So within a year, student will do, and then list the goal. Sometimes they're shorter goals. So it would be on a week, within the week, the student will have done, and then list out whatever that is very specifically. Also, it can be at the end of the 3 years. So at the end of the 3 years, the student is reading fluently at a level, and then it would specify that if that's their needs. So again, you have to have a time on it because then when we're done. So if we have a goal without a time limit, a student will read fluently. They will read 100 words within a minute without prompts, something like that. When do they need to do this by? Is this a goal that's going to take them a whole year to work up to? It might, right? Because it has to be realistic and relevant. Or is this something we feel like they could reach within 6 months or a month? Then it would need to be identified that way. So just kind of go over it again. I'll kind of go through my list. It needs to be specific, needs to be measurable, needs to be realistic and relevant, and then also it needs to have a time limit. So all of those things, when you're looking through those lenses at the goals, that should give you a clear picture of where your student's headed, how he's going to get there. And then lastly, the goals just really need to be sort of objective and not broad. So as detailed as possible, we need to know what the student is supposed to be doing in specific detail. Is there any other parties in play? So like we had talked about prompts. So if a student maybe has a diagnosis of ADHD and they are working on assignments, maybe we want them, the goal is to complete an assignment with only a certain number of prompts from, and then, that educator, maybe general educator or special educator or teacher's aide, something in there would notify them. So again, the more detailed the goal, the better. And I know as parents and guardians who may not have a background in special education, it's really overwhelming. And you meet with a large team. Sometimes there's over 10 people on the IEP team. And when they're presenting this to parents, you look at all of it, it can be over 20 pages, the whole IEP. So it's extremely overwhelming. Sometimes that's just simply why I get involved as an attorney, to help parents through the process and just to hold the school accountable. But when you're looking at the goals, a simple way to really think about it, can you look at that goal and know exactly what they're asking? It's very clear. You don't have to ask questions. Anybody can look at that IEP and know exactly what that goal is. We want to know where the student is going, how they're getting there, who's helping them. And so if you can kind of answer those questions and you're looking at it and it's a very clear picture, you're good to go. The other thing to know also for parents is don't be afraid to ask questions. If you feel like the goal is not tailored to meet your students' needs, speak up. You are on the team. You are a valued member of that team. You are signing off on that IEP. So just remember all of that. If you would like to contact us or you'd like to watch more videos similar to this or our blogs, Our website is linked in the description below, and all of our contact information is there. We're happy to help, so please reach out. Thanks.